Stories about police conduct have been in the news a lot of late, bringing conversations about the amount of training officers receive. In Ohio, laws require more training from our barbers and hairstylists. Tonight, in a 3 News exclusive, investigator Rachel Polanski takes us to a Cleveland area police academy for an insider look at how we train our officers.
I can't breathe!
Outrage over George Floyd's death has rippled throughout the country, invoking the Black Lives Matter movement, demanding police be held to account to be better. For this young black cadet from Cleveland, his own day of reckoning.
Black Lives Matter!
As the country rethinks policing and how they're trained.
I'm seeing my dad grow up. He's a police officer. He works in Cleveland.
Anthony Tatum comes from a family of police officers, and it's a tradition he wants to carry on.
So that was kind of my inspiration growing up.
Now, Anthony is one of a dozen cadets taking 737 hours of classes to become a police officer at Tri-C's Basic Training Academy in Cuyahoga County. But is that enough? They started training in February, before COVID-19 took center stage and before any of us knew the name George Floyd.
I don't see no riot here!
Today, as the protests and marches still ring in our ears, Anthony's dream to follow in his father's footsteps has not wavered.
Made my desire stronger because it seems like our communities are in more need of a stronger foundation.
To many, a stronger foundation goes right to the heart of this issue. And it begins with how we train our police officers. Right now, police departments in the United States complete 672 hours of basic training on average before joining the force. In Ohio, it's slightly higher at 737 hours. But when 3 News Investigate studied requirements around the world, we found that the United States has the lowest police training requirements by far. Now let's just look at other Ohio professions. Electricians must complete 2,000 hours of training. Barbers, 1,800 hours. And again, police officers, 737 hours.
Can we do better? Absolutely.
I brought these findings to Tri-C's Police Chief Clayton Harris.
Everyone is concerned right now. Are police in the early stages? Are they the right people? Are they the ones going into this field properly? Is the training appropriate for what they're going to do when they're out there in the community? And my answer for that is all yes.
Simply put, Chief Harris doesn't blame police brutality on a lack of cadet training, but he does think officers could use ongoing training once they're sworn in.
It's not just more. You need it annually. It's something that needs to occur on a regular basis.
So what do Ohio cadets learn in those 737 hours? The top 3 topics include legal, human resources, and subject control techniques. And coming up tomorrow night, you'll hear from experts who say not only do police need more training, but the entire profession should also consider requiring a college degree, just as we do in other professions, like teachers, nurses, and lawyers.
When you consider the awesome power that we bestow or entrust in our police officers, it would be expected that there would be higher levels of educational requirements.
That part of our exclusive story tomorrow night at 11 o'clock on What's Next. Rachel Polanski, 3 News.
For years, we have told you about the backlog of untested rape kits in Ohio.
And while the state is slowly catching up, 3 News Investigates has uncovered another pitfall: the lack of specially trained nurses to care for rape survivors. 3 News investigator Rachel Polanski shows us how this shortage is placing survivors and criminal cases at risk.
Here, match these up.
Even in these happy moments with her daughter,
Who are those guys?
Anna and
And Elsa.
Ashley Parrott's mind drifts to a darker place in 2003.
It's always going to have an impact on me.
When she was violently beaten and raped by her boyfriend.
The rage kept going and going, and then he got a knife.
Eventually, a family member called 911. Ashley's rapist was arrested and she was rushed to the hospital. Doctors treated her extensive injuries, but a forensic exam, one that would collect critical evidence of the rape, was overlooked. Something that doesn't surprise Ruth Downing.
We have very few forensic nurses in the state.
Downing is a forensic nurse, trained to recognize sexual trauma and document the evidence.
We provide a thorough head-to-toe evaluation, document all of that with body maps, and we also gather evidence for the crime lab.
While there are more than 200,000 registered nurses in Ohio, a 3 News investigation has found that only 51 are sexual assault nurse examiners, commonly called SANE nurses, certified to treat adult sexual assault patients, and just 27 are certified to treat children.
Please go to.
And that critical shortage means rape survivors could be getting turned away at the ER.
They may be asked to go to the next closest hospital that has a forensic nurse. So they may need to travel hours away.
Only 1 in 3 of Ohio's 250 plus hospitals have a SANE nurse program, and most of them are in urban areas, leaving rural communities exposed.
Here in Ashtabula County, they've got to go to Lake County or Cuyahoga County.
Prosecutors in smaller counties worry that fewer SANE nurses could mean fewer survivors coming forward.
The sexual assault exam is essential to any prosecution. So if they can't get that done or just give up because it's too hard, that puts the case at a disadvantage.
Downing says the job is mentally exhausting and the certification process lengthy and expensive. But it's a heavy burden she shoulders with pride.
Nurses want to make a difference. That's why we do this work.
In Ashley's case, the rural hospital where she was treated did not have a SANE nurse on call. And it was almost an afterthought when she was examined 4 days later at a different hospital miles away.
I'm not ashamed of what happened to me.
For her, the SANE nurse uncovered injuries that bolstered a rape charge against her attacker, while reaffirming her decision to come forward.
I'm not scared of him anymore.
Giving her a sense of empowerment.
You can do it.
Something she hopes to instill in her daughter.
2 minutes with these.
2 minutes with these.
Woohoo!
This shortage of sexual assault nurses is a national problem. In Illinois, though, a new law requires that hospitals be staffed with these nurses around the clock. In Ohio, our lawmakers have yet to take action. To look at a full list of Ohio hospitals with SANE programs, head on over to WKYC.com. Rachel Plansky, 3 News. To understand the vaccine debate, first you have to understand herd immunity.
Herd immunity is this concept that when enough people are immune to an illness, even if somebody from the outside were to expose that community to the illness, it's very unlikely that the illness would take root in the community.
But in order to reach herd immunity, you need a certain percentage of a population to be vaccinated. For example, to get herd immunity from the measles, you need 95% of a population to be vaccinated.
The problem is if the number of vaccinated individuals starts to go down, then you don't have that herd immunity, and then you can start to have outbreaks of an illness.
That's where the anti-vaccine movement comes into the picture, and it goes all the way back to a now debunked study from 1998, falsely linking the MMR vaccine to autism. Since then, misinformation about vaccines has been spreading across the internet like wildfire.
My hesitancy honestly just comes from researching.
Vanessa Schaefer joins a growing number of parents who choose not to vaccinate their kids. But hold on, you might be asking, doesn't Ohio law require parents vaccinate their kids in order to send them to school? Yes and no. There are 2 exemptions, 1 medical and 2 reasons of conscience, such as religious or other beliefs.
I chose the religious exemption because it is available to me.
Schaefer and other parents often justify their choices by saying their unvaccinated kids pose no risk to their classmates because everyone else already has their vaccines. That's where Dr. Edwards says they're wrong.
There are some people who have genuine medical reasons that don't allow them to get vaccinated.
That includes this little boy, Liam. Because he had cancer, his doctor said he couldn't receive some vaccines, like MMR or the flu shot.
When Liam was going through chemotherapy, and if he would have got a common cold, much less the flu or the measles or anything like that, it could have killed him.
And Liam's mom, Wendy, says those parents who choose not to vaccinate their kids for personal or religious beliefs put vulnerable children like her son at greater risk.
As scary as it can get to know that something very simple could take your child down, in addition to what they're already facing.
While this discussion is at the forefront right now because of the COVID-19 vaccine, 3 News Investigates has uncovered that parents not wanting to vaccinate their kids has been an issue long before the pandemic began. I pulled the records, and I found in the 2008-2009 school year, 2,900 Ohio children were exempted from vaccines for religious or personal beliefs. 10 years later, that number jumped to 9,800 children, a 235% increase, or 1 in every 50 Ohio students not getting vaccinated.
Everybody has their own right to make decisions for their own children, but I want them to understand that their decisions directly affect anyone that they come in contact with.
Both the CDC and the World Health Organization say that vaccines prevent millions of deaths every year and could prevent millions more if only we could improve vaccination rates. For a closer look at my data and how I got it, head on over to our website, that's WKYC.com. Rachel Polanski, 3 News.
Begin this evening with a 3 News exclusive investigation. New information on the Ohio State sex scandal. The victims count into the thousands, all men, all former Ohio State athletes, and one accused predator. But unlike the disturbing sexual abuse cases at Penn State and Michigan State, the accusers at Ohio State, they say they've received little empathy. 3 News investigator Rachel Polanski spoke with one former Buckeye who wonders if men are being treated as lesser victims.
Like any star athlete raised in Ohio, Brock Pemberton had visions of suiting up in scarlet and gray.
A dream come true, so to speak.
And it was. That is until the former shot putter from Findlay met Dr. Richard Strauss.
The first couple of years were great, and then, things kind of got a little strange.
And a routine physical with Dr. Strauss grew into something more than routine.
At first it seemed normal. Of course, it went downhill pretty quick.
Pemberton says the encounter happened nearly 40 years ago, yet it remains seared into his memory. And it wasn't until the news broke that he learned he was not alone. Today, Pemberton is one of hundreds of suspected victims of Dr. Strauss, who worked as the college's physician for 2 decades before he killed himself in 2005. An OSU investigation found that Strauss fondled athletes more than 1,400 times and committed rape another 47 times.
As a student athlete, you don't know what to expect. You don't know what they're looking for, what they're doing. And I think by the time you figure out what it was all about, then, for a lot of people, it was a little too late.
What happened in Columbus is similar to the abuse of female athletes at Michigan State and the children victims of Jerry Sandusky at Penn State. But for many OSU victims, they feel slighted by the apparent indifference to their cases.
This case is the biggest, longest, ugliest sex abuse scandal in NCAA history that nobody's paying attention to.
Dan Caron, Brock's attorney, says that indifference is apparent as a large number of these lawsuits remain unsettled. While victims in Michigan and Pennsylvania collected millions of dollars, he says OSU is offering victims a fraction of that to settle. And Caron believes it's because the Ohio State victims are males.
And evidently, according to Ohio State, when you do this to boys, it's okay. Well, you know what, it's not.
Brock Pemberton agrees, but it will not stop him and another 102 former athletes who are now part of a class action lawsuit against Ohio State.
I don't know, it's one of those things you just try to forget. And then when it came up and all the other things that had happened, then you're like, yeah, this was wrong, and they knew about it.
In a statement, the Ohio State University president called Strauss's conduct reprehensible. To date, OSU has paid over $46 million to 185 survivors. Brock Pemberton is among the hundreds still negotiating. Rachel Polanski, 3 News.
A few decades ago, a wave of child abuse allegations hit Northeast Ohio involving youngsters diagnosed with shaken baby syndrome.
And today, many question those diagnoses, saying they've been led to innocent people being wrongfully convicted of abuse. 3 News investigator Rachel Polanski takes on the debate.
When Leanne Dunkel looks at her daughter, she sees a soaring athletic teen, an honor roll scholar. Certainly not a victim of shaken baby syndrome.
My mom was holding her when they came in and took her.
But once upon a time, that's all doctors saw. And they were wrong.
He didn't want to hear anything we had to say.
Years don't soothe the sting of that failed diagnosis. Instead, tearful memories flood a mother's thoughts.
I couldn't take my kid home, and they said I would be arrested if I did.
She was at Akron Children's Hospital, where renowned pediatric Dr. Daryl Steiner was uncovering case after case of shaken baby syndrome. Today, it's a hotly debated science in both the medical and legal communities. More than 200 criminal cases are unraveling across the nation, while others are making pleas of innocence from behind bars.
There are definitely people serving long sentences, life sentences, for what I believe to be bad science and bad medicine.
Shaken baby syndrome grew prominent in the 1990s, punctuated by the trial of British au pair Louise Woodward. After that, the diagnosis exploded, most notably around Akron, ranking the city third in the entire nation, largely because of Dr. Steiner and his care center.
The pediatrician would become the doctor, the prosecutor, the police officer, and the jury. The pediatrician would say, this is abuse, and that put a caregiver or parent's life into a living hell.
In recent years, the science is shifting. Doctors are recognizing other causes, such as simple falls. Right now, the Ohio Innocence Project is working with 2 women serving life sentences, Tiffany Khaleesi and Marcia Mills, both claiming innocence, both diagnosed by Dr. Steiner.
These are men and women who have been separated from their family for decades.
The Dunkels came close to being one such family. In 2006, they lost custody of their newborn for 4 months. It began when the infant girl fell 3 feet from a table, and to be safe, they took her to Children's Hospital.
It was a very bad decision.
Baby Rachel was examined by Dr. Steiner, who quickly rendered a startling diagnosis. Rachel's future brain development forever altered by this physical abuse.
I thought it was a mix-up, it was a mistake. There was no way she was shaken.
The diagnosis set in motion a series of events. Step 1, baby Rachel was taken away by Children's Services. What followed was months of court hearings and competing medical opinions. Finally,
I get goosebumps just talking about it now.
a judge ruled in the Dunkels' favor. They got their baby back, but nothing else, not even an apology.
It's like it happened for no reason.
It's why the Dunkels want to tell their story about Shaken Baby, to help others wrongly accused.
I just never knew how easy it was for someone to take your child from you.
So are falls and pre-existing medical conditions being misdiagnosed as child abuse? We talked with Dr. Steiner, who said, quote, "I'm retired and I've forgotten everything prior to 2016. Now, despite dozens of cases unraveling, the American Academy of Pediatrics stands by the Shaken Baby diagnosis. Sarah.
So interesting. So many things to think about there. Thanks, Rachel.
Sure.